OJ was seen on national television outrunning the police in his Bronco, we've enjoyed a love affair with the 4x4, the sports utility vehicle. And it must be an image thing. It must be. It has to be about image. What other reason could there possibly be for buying a car that's thirstier, more cramped, and doesn't go around corners as well as a family hatch? And if it is an image thing, then Chrysler have been getting it right for some years with this, the Cherokee. It was first introduced into this country in '93, and it looked like that, since which they've sold 27,000, and the car now looks like this. Pretty much like the original one, really, but if a car is selling that well on its image, why change it? This is the new range topper for the Cherokee, and it's called the Orvis. Based on the limited SE, the top spec Cherokee, which means you already get on board pretty much everything your heart could desire. There's acres of leather and electric everything, including the seat, which is fun. It also means you have a choice of either the 2.5-litre diesel or the 4-litre petrol engines. That means there is no choice because you've got to have the 4-litre petrol. It's a straight 6 and it puts out enormous great dollops of torque. It feels like it's just clawing lumps out of the road. I keep expecting to look in the mirror and see the tarmac all ruckled up like in a cartoon. The Orvis then adds on to that quite a few cosmetic changes outside and in. And it's interesting to see some of the ways in which the car itself has evolved over the years. And here are some of those ways. If you look really carefully, you'll see that the indicators at the front and the grille have subtly changed shape. The car's been extensively rounded off, it's lost some of its squareness, and details like the sills with their ridges have changed and become a lot plainer and cleaner. The interior has been extensively changed over the years. Everything has been rounded off and become a bit softer, perhaps less American, if anything more Japanese in flavour. They're all pretty luxurious. Leather abounds, there's plenty of walnut, though not as much now as there once was. The Orvis version adds further visual cues outside, including the rear boot spoiler, its own special alloys, and these. There's an interesting story about these. They are false. They are a mere adornment. They do nothing. And the managing director of Chrysler UK decided that he liked them and wanted to conduct some customer research of his own at the motor show last year. So he got hold of a set of these, literally stuck them to the bonnet with a bit of blue tack and asked passers-by what they thought. They agreed with him that they looked great. And so there they are. What it is to have power. But hold on, you will say. This thing has a 4-litre 6-cylinder engine. It's going to cost me all of my money to run it. And it probably will. You'll be lucky to see 18 miles to the gallon. But a large part of the real cost of running any vehicle is in the residuals. How much money do you lose when you come to sell it on? If you'd bought one of these 4 or 5 years ago and done, as this one has, about 102,000 miles, it would still be worth £10,000. That is incredible value. I like the Jeep Cherokee. In an increasingly bland and homogenised world, it's managed to hang on to a little bit of character and personality. Sure, there are those who are going to complain that it's a bit more cramped inside than it might be and that it uses a lot of fuel and perhaps it's a bit dated to look at. But to do so is to miss the point entirely. They're probably the same people that complain that they can't get a good crease down the front of the jeans these days. To me, it's an attractive car and it's got a lot for it, particularly when you consider that, OK, it uses a lot of petrol. But if this example, 100,000 miles old, 5 years old, and still retaining 50% of its original value is any kind of illustration of what you or I might expect if we buy a new Cherokee Orvis, then I think we can forgive it using a bit more fuel than perhaps it should.
It's all very well producing an off-roader that looks the part, but if in reality it's nothing more than a King's Road cruiser that won't even cut through the skin of your custard, then what's the point? But if you've got this badge on the front of your 4x4, it's a pretty safe bet that you can get into some serious mischief in it, particularly when you've got the whole of the Scottish Highlands to go at. Well, I've got my Grand Cherokee, it's got all the technology and it's time to put it to the test. There's an off-road course in the Scottish Highlands waiting for me, but before I put a £30,000 brand new vehicle through that, maybe I should get a few tips from the experts first.
Well, the first tip is to be very careful. We're going to be driving through some very narrow sections of road. We've got some steep uphills and downhills, and obviously with a vehicle like this you've got a lot of power there, a lot of traction, especially with the new quad drive system, so you do need to be careful listening to the information that I'm going to be giving you over the radio as we go along, which will be on techniques and how to drive the vehicle.
Well, it sounds like the Cherokee is certainly up for it. I suppose it's time to see if I can handle it. One of the rules in off-roading is that when you go down a hill, you don't use the brakes. They're very strict on this. However, this hill is so bad that they've told us we have to use the brakes this time. Can't wait for this one.
I can't believe we're going to go down that. We're going to go straight into the lock. I must be mad. Oh! Oh, God, have you seen that thing go?
Well, it was a struggle to get up here, but once you're at the top, I've got to say the views are absolutely spectacular. And I've just learnt a survival tip. If you get stranded in the wilderness without any toilet paper, just grab a handful of moss. That was absolutely amazing. I've had such a good time up there. And I'd like to say that it's my driving skill that's got me through it all. But I've got to be honest and say that when you're in a vehicle like the new Grand Cherokee, all you really need to do is put your trust in the vehicle and just keep an eye on where you're going. This is just so competent. Now, I know that 93% of off-roaders never see more than the odd trundle up a country lane or maybe the school run. But if you fancy finding out what an off-roader can really do, then I can report that the Grand Cherokee performs as well on-road as it does off. Go on, go and find yourself some mud. You don't know what you're missing. Most manufacturers just sell cars, but not a manufacturer like Jeep. They do much more than provide you with four wheels to get you from A to B. When you buy a Jeep, you buy a whole lifestyle as well. Now, you may live in a semi in Croydon, but having one of these parts in your driveway makes you feel a little bit more adventurous. I reckon that if John Wayne could have got down off his horse, then this would have been the kind of car he chose to drive. So I imagine that the designers at Jeep realised they had a huge act to follow when they sat down to work on the new version. New version, I hear you ask? Well, that's actually what this is. It may not look like it, but it is the all-new Jeep Grand Cherokee 1999. Even though there aren't enormous changes in styling, don't think for 1 minute that this is just a revamp. There are actually only 127 parts carried over on this version from the old. Most of those are just nuts and bolts, the largest of which is the oil filter on this 4-litre version. Now, the Grand Cherokee sits on the same wheelbase as the old model, but it's a much bigger vehicle. It's 110mm longer, 54mm wider and 30mm higher. But even though it's grown in every direction, it's not a huge hike to get into it. All you need is one dainty little step and you're in. As soon as you get inside the cabin, you notice the feeling of quality. You sink into really comfortable leather seats. Everything feels very refined and it's very well made. If gadgets are the thing that do it for you, then there are plenty of them in here. There's electric everything. There's a great stereo, dual air conditioning, and my favourite, heated seats for those cold winter mornings. And I've got to say, there's also plenty of space. There's lots of headroom and there's certainly enough legroom for the driver and the passengers. And if you work your way around to the back, you'll see the load area is now bigger than it used to be. That's because that huge spare tyre now lives underneath the cargo floor instead of taking up valuable space. Now, improvements, as we all know, cost money. So how many more pennies are you going to have to pay to get behind the wheel of the all-new improved Grand Cherokee? Well, the answer is actually not 1 penny more. That's because this 4-litre Limited is exactly the same price as the version it replaces. That's just under £30,000. Perhaps the Chancellor, Mr. Brown, could do with a few lessons in reducing inflation from the chaps at Chrysler Jeep. The old Grand Cherokee was one of those cars that I couldn't ever imagine getting any better. That was until I drove the new version. It really is so impressive. It's refined and it's luxurious, and it's almost hard to imagine it doing all those adventurous things that the Jeep is so well known for.
But the Cherokee is just as capable off-road as it is on, and so is its arch rival, the Land Rover Discovery, which we'll be driving after the break.
You'd think that with little other good news coming out of Rover at the moment, that their heads might be elsewhere rather than improving on a success story by introducing the new Land Rover Discovery. But here it is, and in a showroom just about near you now. The all-new Land Rover Discovery, which looks just like the other one. To be fair, this is partly the result of an owner's survey, which said we like the styling, but improve the road handling and the build quality. And so what you get is this. It's very hard to tell the two apart, so here is Motor Week's 4-part guide. A U-shaped surround to the front grille, that's an obvious one. An extra 5 inches body length gives more space in the back and a more balanced look. It's also slightly wider, which makes it beefier and improves stability. And new, higher, larger tail lights. Well, clearly the new version isn't designed to turn heads, so you'll have to persuade people that it was worth paying the 7% or so extra because it's a much classier drive. And to test that theory, well, we'll just have to drive them both at the same time. Land Rover first introduced the Discovery as a seriously professional all-rounder, smooth and comfortable in town and on motorways, with superb off-road capabilities to compete with anything else around. And it largely succeeded. OK, much of Middle England thought it was just the thing for popping the kids down to school and never found out what that second little gear shift was for, but most serious owners were generally happy on the whole, and Land Rover received plaudits from the motoring press. Now, I'd never driven a Land Rover Discovery before these two brutes landed up in my drive, and the first thing you notice is just how high the driver's position is. Land Rover call this the command position, presumably because you get a commanding view. And what's more, the horizon expands even further at the touch of a button. Going up. Whoa! I can see Surrey from up here. But then again, we are in Surrey. A good way to test the handiness of the layout of the cabin controls is to drive any car for the first time at night, so you can grope your way around and feel whether things are where they should be. And one thing I couldn't find were those seat controls, which is on the central console here. And one thing that I'm not keen on at all is the position of the door handle, which is well forward and down quite a long way, and that hasn't been changed on the new version, but it is a bit of a minor quibble. The old version is perfectly comfortable, but this one is even better, with a larger windscreen, which allows me to see even more of Surrey from my leather-bound perch. Also, an obvious add-on are these armrests, fully adjustable and a very good idea. Electronic gizmos abound here too. There's, for instance, his and hers matching digital heat controls, and two new buttons here which activate some important new improvements. For instance, this one is your hill descent control. This switch jacks the back of the car up on self-levelling air springs to give you extra clearance over boulders and whatever off-road. Or if you want to lower your rear end onto a tow hitch to connect up to your powerboat or glider. And then there's this that everyone talks about. It's a curry hook, somewhere to hang your takeaway on. They've thought of everything. Both Discoveries seat 7, but with not the sort of legroom that you'd expect in an MPV back there. And although my kids loved the side-facing rearmost seats, they're not really practical for adults, and the owner's survey wanted those changed. So the new rearmost seats are forward-facing, with superbly clever drop-down headrests. There's still not a lot of legroom, although you can take your mind off those sore knees by tuning into your own choice of radio station. Garfunkel in the front for Mum and Dad, and garbage in the back. Both versions of the Discovery I'm driving have comparable power units on the surface, but they're very different underneath. This is the old 3.9 litre automatic V8 injection, which does 0 to 60 in a respectable 11 seconds, but has an alarming combined MPG of just 17. Gulp. It's supposed to be slightly quicker and more frugal on the fuel too, which is good news. It's definitely more responsive, the power-assisted braking works really well, and is it me, or does it have a tighter turning circle than the old version too? It certainly feels like it. For a start, they've stiffened up the chassis, which now has an extra cross member, and they've introduced steering improvements, which make the car handle much more responsively like a smaller car. But the ace in the hole, as far as this car is concerned, is precisely that. ACE, or Active Cornering Enhancement. Land Rover told us that one of the most significant developments on the new Discovery is its ACE. And no, they weren't criticising the old Discovery, well, they wouldn't, would they? But one snipe often levelled at the outgoing model was that it pitched and rolls through corners, a corollary of its excellent off-road ability. The engineer's aim was to provide car-like handling without sacrificing the off-road ability Land Rover owners have come to expect. The answer? ACE, or Active Cornering Enhancement. Lateral acceleration is detected by body-mounted sensors and the information fed to the system computer. The computer assesses the situation and decides whether you're flying along your favourite A-road or going completely mad off-road. An engine-mounted pump provides the pressure required for roll control modules, which counteracts body roll and stiffens suspension movement. And having ACE rather than conventional anti-roll bars allows for lower rate springs, giving maximum articulation off-road and passenger rise comfort. The system senses what's needed. As a result of this technology, the new Discovery carves up bends much better than before. The car doesn't roll as much through corners either, and the electronic roll control is designed to cut in and out unnoticed. As for safety features, well, airbags abound in both models, but I'm very surprised how thin and tinny the doors are. They don't seem to be too protective, although sitting up here I suppose the only thing that's going to broadside you is a lorry or another Land Rover. And in any case, the aluminium doors on this old version have been replaced by steel ones, which will at least help to prevent dings. One of the surprises Land Rover unveiled at the Discovery launch was the new Storm diesel engine. It's not related to any BMW unit. The Storm was in the early stages of development when the German firm took over. Originally planned as part of a modular group of 4, 5 and 6 cylinder units, the Discovery gets the 2.5 litre straight 5, producing 136 bhp, but more importantly, a maximum torque of 232 pound-foot. And a large proportion of that torque comes very low down in the rev range. In order to achieve the specific requirements of Land Rover's heavy off-roader and still meet future emissions requirements, the engineers needed to turn to high-pressure direct injection. The engineers chose to adopt electronic unit injectors, or EUI. This system had a proven track record in large diesels fitted to trucks, reducing emissions whilst increasing economy. One of the keys to good diesel emissions is high-pressure fuel injection. EUI uses an individual camshaft-driven plunger pump for each cylinder's injector. This allows up to 22,000 psi to be generated, compared to about half that for a standard direct high-pressure injection system. And because the pressure is only contained for a short period within the injector, there's plenty of potential to increase the pressure further. Common rail systems, which are becoming the vogue in diesel design, are limited in the pressure they can contend with because of the connections and distribution pipes needed for them to operate. Land Rover proudly claim that the new unit exceeds even future emissions requirements without needing a catalyst.